My name is Elias Alcantara, and I am Senior Associate Director of the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. One of my main roles is to work with mayors, county officials, police chiefs, sheriffs, and folks across the country, many of you who are sitting here today, on the issue of community policing, and more specifically, 21st century policing. Before we get started, and this video we're about to show, we've been having these convenings for several weeks now, really throughout the administration, but in this fashion and format for the past few weeks. And we've always started with this video, but I think given the events of last week, as you all know, whether it's Louisiana, Minnesota, and more specifically Dallas, I think it means that much more that we continue to obviously honor and support our men and women in uniform across the country. I personally had the privilege to be in Dallas earlier this week. And again, it was just a reminder at how important the work is that each and every one of you do. So again, before we get started, I just want to show you a quick video of the president engaging with some very, very valiant law enforcement officials.
To a person, each of these honorees acted without regard for their own safety. They stood up to dangerous individuals brandishing assault rifles, handguns, and knives. The truth is, it's because of your courage, sometimes seen but sometimes unseen, that the rest of us can go about living our lives like it's any other day.
It is a tough job. The community benefits from it, the country benefits from it. We're very, very proud of it. So it's a nice way to be able to say thank you. All right? Thank you, sir.
Not everyone will wear the medal that we give today, but every day so many of our public safety officers wear a badge of honor. Today we also want to acknowledge the profound sacrifices made by your families, and I had the chance to meet some of them, and they were all clearly so proud of you, but we're very proud of them. We know that you wait up late and you're worried and you're counting down the minutes until your loved one walks through the door safe after a long shift. We know it never gets easier. We thank you for that.
And who you got here? What's this crew here?
How are you? Can I shake your hand? So, how old are you? 5 years old. Sam, good to see you. Oh, thank you so much. I got the coin and the patches.
7. Oh, almost 8. Okay, when's your birthday?
Oh, it's coming up. Wow.
White Erica.
How are you? So nice to see you. Well, you guys all look so nice. I'm very proud of your dad.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. And I've been almost 5 years, and you're going to hear almost 5 years. And you're going to hear from Cecilia Munoz in a minute. That's been here throughout the administration. And events like these, again, are a reminder of the great work that you all do. And as the president said that day, and as he reiterated really in Dallas at the memorial service for the 5 fallen officers, medals and ceremonies like the ones given that day are important, but these aren't enough to convey the true depth of our gratitude. Our words will be hollow if they're not matched by deeds. So our nation has a responsibility to support those who serve and protect us. So before I officially start, on behalf of the president, Cecilia, the entire team here, we just want to thank you for your service in the communities that you represent. And now, as many of you are probably wondering when you read the invitation to today's event, this is now the third in a series of convenings that we've been hosting on this very issue. And again, we've been having many convenings with law enforcement officials across the administration, but have taken a new approach here over the last couple of weeks. And these briefings are open to public safety officials, officers across the country of all ranks, and will provide you with an overview of the recommendations from the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. This briefing will allow you to discuss what the recommendations mean to your everyday work, and with a focus on specific areas, and we'll get into that a little bit later. In addition, you will be joined by several senior administration officials to brainstorm these new ideas about how to enhance public trust and confidence in the justice system while maintaining public safety. We don't have many rules today, but the main rule really, which is for us, is that we're going to keep our comments very brief and short, because a lot of it is we want to hear from you all and want to engage in a two-way dialogue. Without further ado, again, I want to thank you all for being here, and I would love to introduce the White House Director of the Domestic Policy Council, who has been working day in and night out on this very issue, Cecilia Munoz. Cecilia.
Thank you, Elias. Good afternoon. Let me just add my welcome to Elias's welcome. We're really, really thrilled to see you here, and add my thanks to his thanks to all of you for the work that you do day in and day out. As you heard, I direct the Domestic Policy Council for the President, and the issues of policing, of criminal justice, of civil rights all fall under in my portfolio. And we come together to have this conversation at a really poignant time, a really solemn time, a really serious time. This has been an extraordinary and difficult week, I'm sure for all of you and certainly for all of us as well. And so I should just start by acknowledging the losses that we had in Dallas and again extend condolences. Our hearts were broken here, as they were all around the country. And we continue to offer our prayers for those who are still recovering. And you heard, as the President has said over and over and over again, we can both honor the courage and service of our police officers and recognize the racial disparities that exist in our criminal justice system. There is no contradiction there. We have been thinking a lot in this building this week about the charge of doing better, making sure that we give it our best, which is why you're here today. And we're really extraordinarily grateful that you're here. As you heard, this is our third such convening. You're going to be spending time here with the team that helped pull together the task force, which produced the recommendations that you're going to be discussing today. And the President was very, very clear when he asked his team to put together the task force, when we were thinking through who he might appoint. He made it very, very clear that he wanted people who could work quickly so that we could get this conversation going quickly, and people who would be focused very hard on specifics. He wanted actionable items, and he wanted them in, frankly, record time, especially when you're someone who works in the government. We don't tend to operate terribly quickly. And so what we got was a product that is very actionable, that's very specific, that's very clear. That's what he asked for, and we're really proud of the work of the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, and very, very proud of the work of the COPS Office. And I know you're going to be spending some time with our really wonderful colleague, Ron Davis, today. But I want to make sure you know that the conversation doesn't end when you leave the White House today. In fact, this isn't the first conversation or even the second conversation that we've been engaged with this week. The President met with some leaders from the law enforcement community on Monday, and on Wednesday he spent the entire afternoon, for more than 4 hours, listening to police officers, to civil rights activists, to community groups, to mayors, to governors, about how we can support law enforcement while ensuring that we strengthen the relationships that are essential to keeping the public safe and building trust between the police and the communities that they serve. So I described for you the work of the President's task force. He really wanted a roadmap for the 18,000 police agencies all around the country to help them build trust with the communities that they serve. You know perhaps better than anybody else that trust is essential if we're going to keep communities safe. It was important to him that the task force work together to find common ground and craft recommendations that address the challenges faced by officers directly and also the challenges faced by communities. And one of the things that you will hear task force members say that they were proudest of is that you had seasoned law enforcement officials at the table. You also had community activists at the table. And they reached a consensus on these recommendations, and they were very proud of that, and I suspect it was fairly hard work. But the experience that they recount from those meetings, and this is true of the 4-hour-long meeting that the President had earlier this week, is that people really listened to each other. They said hard things to each other. They did their best to put themselves into each other's shoes. And as a result, what you got was a report that was detailed, that was fair, and that was really comprehensive. It's really a remarkable piece of work, and we're starting to see police forces around the country take action on those task forces' recommendations. For example, the President traveled to Camden, New Jersey last year. He went there to announce the report because he wanted to highlight how law enforcement officers in that city have been making a difference day in and day out in that community, building trust and bringing hope to a city that has had more than its share of challenges. Camden was one of the first cities to participate in the White House Police Data Initiative, which you're going to be hearing more about today. We're placing a big bet on data. As came up in the meeting with the president, you can't fix what you can't measure. That we need to know more about what's going on so that we can really be comprehensive about what works to fix it. So you'll be hearing more about that today. So again, on behalf of the president, thank you so much for being here, for taking the time to be here, for digging in on this incredibly important work at this incredibly important time. But more importantly, thank you for what you do every single day. I want you to hear from all of us how much we appreciate it, how much we respect it, how much we want to be invested in being your partners in doing the best that we can all possibly do to keep Americans safe, to build kind of trust, and to build back from the kinds of challenges that we've been facing this week. So I will, as consistent with what Elias said, I don't want to talk for too long because we've got work to do. But thank you both for the work that brought you here and for the work that's still ahead of you. Thanks.
So I'm about to introduce someone that needs no introduction. I'm sure most of you know him, or most of you have had your agencies work with him. The person that's been really at the forefront of not only the 21st Century Policing Task Force, but also the broader work with law enforcement agencies across the country, and many of you all. Without further ado, Ron Davis, the Director of the COPS Office at the Department of Justice.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Okay. So for the next 2 hours, I'm just kidding. You don't hear me for 2 hours. I've been asked to come and talk to you about the task force. I think Cecilia provided you a pretty good opening, but I'll tell you some of the stories, some of the work, and what it means to you, and the outstanding work that you're already doing. So as was mentioned in December 2014, following the Michael Brown shooting and a series of other videos, Eric Gardner in New York, and other tragedies and challenges that we as a nation faced, the president put together the 21st Century Policing Task Force. Now, I had the honor to serve as the executive director, which means the COPS office provided administrative support, served as basically the staff of the task force. And what it gave me was, I'll tell people, is the front seat to history, watching the 11 task force members do their work. What made this task force unique, it was already mentioned, is that not just was 11 diverse individuals, because we had 45-year veterans. We had Charles Ramsey, Roberto Villaseñor from Tucson, Cedric Alexander from Georgia. But we also had academics, Lori Robinson, Tracy Mears. We had civil rights attorneys, Connie Rice, anybody from Southern California. And we had people right off the demonstrations line, both in Ferguson and New York, with Brittany Packett and Jose Lopez. And it was interesting. We were forced to come together consensus. And so I met these individuals, I met this group, and I'm thinking to myself, how are these 11 so diverse perspectives going to build consensus on anything the time that we're going to meet, let alone recommendations how to build trust. To add to that, when we met with the president, he said he wanted this done in 90 days. Because what he did not want was a Washington, D.C. process, which would be 2 years of meetings and discussions and think tanks, and then you come up with a very beautiful report that pretty much fits somewhere on a shelf, and for history, it just sits there. So he was clear this is what he wanted. So the task force, I think the timeline made a couple things possible, or actually made a requirement. First, the task force got together and realized that, as I realize now being here in D.C., that there are, this is a secret, this live stream? Okay, anyway, I let the secret out, that there aren't too many solutions here in DC. You know, I've been here close to 3 years. I've been looking for them. I haven't found them quite yet. And so what I've really realized that the solutions are actually in your jurisdictions, what you're doing every day. It's you dealing with the challenges of the cases that occur, making some good decisions, making a few bad ones, having some successes, experiencing some setbacks. All of that is about learning and basically best lessons to be achieved. So what the task force said is we don't want to be a think tank. We don't want to close the doors and think of ways that we think that the 11 of us plus the COPS office or DOJ could solve the problem. We want to listen to the field. So we engage in a series of listening sessions around the country to look around. Many of you actually testified. I see Kent Rainey from BART and a few others that actually we asked to testify. So we heard from law enforcement leaders. We heard from civil rights communities. We heard from rank and file. We heard from sheriffs. We heard from pretty much every stakeholder, organization, and group that we could muster to come in and to testify on the 6 pillars. We'll talk about the pillars in a second, with the idea is that we wanted to hear from the field. We wanted to hear the best research, the best practices, the lessons learned from the field. So now when you look at this report that was put together in 90 days with the 59 recommendations, it truly represents not just that which the task force put together, but them going through the hundreds and hundreds of recommendations that we received from the hundreds and hundreds of people that testified, moving around the United States, allowing people to give feedback online and public conferences, conference calls, and all of our sessions were open to the public, and most of them, if not all of them, were televised. So as you look at the report, don't look at it as a DC report. Look at it as a report from the field to the field about how to move forward. And what we're seeing so far is they focused on it. The two areas that stand out the most, you guys have the pillars, hopefully you all read it, is we started with building trust and legitimacy, and then pillar 6 is officer safety and wellness. And I'm gonna put those two in because we're gonna focus probably some of those, I think, today primarily, but obviously we want all of them to be implemented. But look at those as the two bookends that really tell the story, right? If you don't have trust and legitimacy in the community, then the police can't be effective. Equally, if you don't take care of your officers and deputies, nothing happens. And so those two pillars really shape or control or contain our success, that we have to start with those to make sure that we can then focus on training and education. We can focus on technology and social media. We can focus on policy and oversight, talk about body cameras. We can talk about de-escalation. But we know it's all about building trust. We'll also make sure we have a very strong, very well police department to serve. And so I think the task force did a great job. The president also said something once we handed him this report, and it was a proud moment to hand the president a report and a timeline, because if you don't want to miss the timeline if the president asks you to do something. So we had a nice ceremony. We handed the president the report. He went to Camden to announce the report, it was mentioned. But then he also said, well, look, we also need this to be tenable. We need the field to want to adopt it because they see the need for it. So what's the implementation plan going to be? We want something that incentivizes and encourages agencies to see this as their recommendations and how to move forward. And I would tell you this as someone who's been in law enforcement for 30 years. I had the privilege of spending 20 years in the great city of Oakland, and I left there to become police chief for about 9 years in a smaller jurisdiction in the Bay Area called East Palo Alto. And in my close to 30 years, I've seen a lot of things come and go like you have. I've seen a lot of trends, a lot of things. I mean, a lot of crisis has occurred, and usually it doesn't stay with us very long. A trend comes and goes. The crisis of the moment disappears. This is unique. I've never seen anything like it with regards to this task force report, and primarily because of the work that you're doing. You should know that all of your major law enforcement associations are working very closely with the administration. The International Association of Chiefs of Police has a new center for building trust between police and communities of color, and all communities, actually. We're working with the National Sheriff's Association, major county sheriffs, the Police Executive Research Forum, Noble, pretty much the FOP, even the rank and file, which some people think are against advancement. All evidence is to the contrary. We know better than that. We know that rank and file want to serve as much as we want them to serve, as much as the community demands to be served. And so to have the kind of relationships we're seeing, it doesn't mean that we're in agreement on all 59 recommendations. It doesn't mean that we walk around here every day holding hands saying, how can we work together? It says that everyone has looked at the report and realized that there's value in these recommendations, and we're working ahead. So we're supporting those efforts in some of the cases with grants to make sure that we can advance this. We are also looking at, if you've applied for a COPS grant recently, you will notice that we put a lot of focus on the task force, and rightfully so. So if you want a hiring grant from us, you'll see that we ask for preference areas, and many of those preference areas are shaped around the pillars in the task force. If you want a community policing development grant, you will see that it's shaped around doing further research and identifying creative and innovative ways around the task force. If you come to us for collaborative reform or need immediate assistance, you'll see that we will basically be focusing heavy on the task force recommendations, providing implicit bias training, dealing with issues of procedural justice. We're all in because we think this is the roadmap. If you're not aware, the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General just announced that all federal law enforcement agencies and U.S. attorneys, AUSAs, will receive fair and impartial policing training, so that the federal government is modeling the behavior and the expectations and the recommendations that you're providing you. All of that is to say, if I can, that we have a unique opportunity. I mean, we can look at tragedies. We know that unfortunately they occur too much. I think everyone in this room, I don't have to say what we felt when we saw the tragedy in Dallas after 30 years. I've already been to too many funerals. I've lost too many friends. I've lost people that have worked for me. And that idea of losing one of your colleagues and making that notification is just a horrific thought. But we also know that we have a lot of work to do, that we've made a lot of advancements in the last 30 years. I think back when I got hired in Oakland, when I looked at the classroom that I was in for the academy, the diversity of it or the lack thereof. If I look at the policies and practices and where we evolved as a department, if I look at the technology, we've made significant progress. No one should deny that. We should be proud and keep our heads up about that. But if we're going to be true to each other, if we're going to continually seek for the justice that people want, justice is really another word for truth, then the truth is that we have left a lot of people behind. The truth is that a lot of our systems, whether intentional or not, now have the impact to cause collateral damage, whether it is the mass and disparate incarceration of young men of color, whether it is systems that have destroyed neighborhoods to where there's no trust. Whatever the cause, whatever our intent was, we have caused some damage. And I think we need to acknowledge that some of those systems, some of those historically were intentional, some more recent were unintentional, have still caused pain for many communities, and we now have to build that trust. Without trust, we will not succeed as a profession. And so these are hard conversations. It makes people squirm in their seat. It's going to make some of your officers mad at you. But courage is not just running towards gunfire. It's also have the courage to tell the truth, right? And people always talk about, telling truth to power. Well, if I look around this room, you're power. So I'm telling you the truth, but really the challenge is not just telling truth to power, it's for power to tell the truth. It's for you to get in front of your podium, your roll call, your department, and say that there are different and better ways. It's for you to identify ways that you can reduce crime and violence without getting into this mass incarceration or the fairness in the system to ensure that every person has a fair opportunity of success. There's no guaranteed successes in life. We should guarantee the fair opportunity to that. It's the kind of truth that says that when something doesn't work, that we acknowledge it, apologize for it, close ranks, and fix it. That's what we're about. So as you moving forward, we have this opportunity. We've made a lot of progress. The American people know it. I think you heard the president talk about his respect and admiration and support for law enforcement, but he also said that we have a lot of work to do. And so today is about understanding the task force. It's about moving forward. It's about justice. I always tell a lot of my agencies that I work with collaborative reform, people call and say, can you do an assessment? Can you help us? Can you take a look at it? And I give them a heads up that if you ask me to take a look, I'm going to tell you the truth. But one thing society has taught us, one thing history has taught us, one thing that you know intuitively is we all know the truth hurts. It hurts often, but selective ignorance is fatal. To decide not to know is fatal. To pretend and not to know the truth is fatal. So you would rather take a short-term pain of collecting data and letting people know that maybe there's a disparity that can be fixed than to pretend like it doesn't exist, don't collect the data, and then ignore people's cries and their grievances in the community because you don't want to hear it. It may be painful to be able to acknowledge that we can find better ways to reduce force by enhancing de-escalation, by focusing on crisis intervention, by having a strong relationship with the community, or we can pretend like there's no problem if people just simply complied that this would stop. We can do a lot of things that will be comfortable, that would be in our safe zones, but if you wanted to be safe, you wouldn't be in law enforcement. So we already know that you have the courage, we already know that you have the commitment, and we already definitely know that you have the integrity. So now's the time. Now's the time for us to take leadership because America needs healing. The country needs healing, and they're going to turn to you. You have the ability, when you go back, I'm looking at 100 plus people that represent, I would imagine 70 plus agencies that represent thousands of police officers that are turning to you for leadership. And your confidence in your ability to move forward, your confidence in the ability to make change, your confidence in the ability of the great work that they're already doing can actually help tremendously. So as you guys do your work today, I ask of you that you think about how to go back and to energize and synergize and support your officers to understand that 21st century policing does not have to be an indictment of the past or an indictment of what they've done, but it should be an acknowledgement of where we need to go. We know that we've made progress. We know that we've also had some setbacks, and we know that we've made mistakes and that some of our systems have to be changed. And that's the part I think I would also want to do as I close, have you focus on, is to recognize that as we are critiquing the policing system in America, as we are transforming it, as we're demanding for reform in it, please understand how you can separate the American policing system from the American police officer. And if anyone who follows Deming, for example, the great management guru, he has an 85-15 rule. Right? When there's a problem inside of an organization, 85% is usually system-related, only 15% is worker-related. And we have operational systems that actually are so bad that even good officers have bad outcomes. And so it's up to us to decide where they get deployed. And if you throw a cop into a neighborhood and then tell them to engage in enforcement activity, and then when that activity is disparate, then to say they need more training is blaming them. Because they don't need more training, we need more training for the deployment to begin with. If we have them engaging in practices that are not evidence-based and has collateral damage, that's not the fault of the officers. If we're hiring people that are not qualified for the job and have implicit bias that can't be put in check, that's not the officer's fault. If we don't have the kind of policies, the tools, we don't train on de-escalation, we don't basically engage the community, that's not the officer's fault, that's our fault. So in many ways, we have the American police officer carrying the burden for so many things that they're not responsible for, as you heard the president said, and not just in society, within our organizations. That would be the truth. And like you said, the truth can hurt, but selective ignorance is fatal. So as you go back, I think your charge is to engage today, to learn as much as you can, to think about ways to advance your department, to be one of the examples that we know that you're going to be, and to make sure that your officers know the truth, live the truth, and become the truth themselves, and that way we work together to have justice. I'm going to stop there because I think we want a couple questions. Any questions about the task force recommendations? Ones you agree with, ones you disagree with? The ones you disagree with, I will blame the task force members. The ones you agree with, I'll probably help them craft it. So. Fire away, although I'm going to pick somebody, pick one. And he knows who I'm going to pick. Kenton, how are you doing from BART? Tell me what you're doing.
Randy from the San Francisco Bay Area Rapid Transit District, out in California. Greetings, glad to be here. Here for the 40th anniversary of the Mobile Conference. I was here last week at the Center for Policing Equity, where we've been participating in that data initiative. And I think you're spot on in everything you're talking about and what's going on at the Justice Department. One of the things that we actually brought Chief Ramsey out to California, the Contra Costa Police Chiefs Association, Alameda County Police Chiefs Association. We brought him out to talk about this very thing to our personnel, about the task force recommendations. And needless to say, all the reviews that we got, they were just spot on. They were very, very encouraged about what he had to say. Very, very skeptical when we try to be prophets in our own backyards. But when you hear him talk, he is such a very, very dynamic, incredible individual. So.
And if I could just say this for Will, so Kenton, there's a couple people I recognize. I see Cecil over there. I have my glasses on, but I still see Cecil at Sanford. I want you to think about the challenge and when you guys engage and talk. So Kenton was brought in after the everybody watched Fruitvale Station, after the Oscar Grant shooting, and you saw how that really tore at the public and community trust issues in the Bay Area, and not just for BART, but for the entire Bay Area. And the transformational process that BART is going through has been nothing but amazing. So congratulations for the outstanding work. Cecil Smith was brought in Sanford, Florida, following the Trayvon Martin tragedy, and the same thing. And if you watch how he engaged the community, I asked both of these gentlemen, why I'm picking on them, to one of the biggest programs we have is called peer-to-peer, where I think we learn from each other. So if an agency is in crisis, they're having demonstrations, they're facing challenges, instead of some bureaucrat, because I've now officially have a bureaucratic tie, I'm a Fed. Instead of hearing from me, I would rather that they hear from people that have actually engaged in it, have had the hard lessons, and to explain how they can engage in the community to such a manner that even when people don't have the outcome that they desire, because the process was fair, that's all about, that's procedural justice, that they still respected that outcome, and it feels different and looks different. So, and I'm sure this is the great part about it, as I look around, I'm sure there's dozens and dozens of stories like that. And that's what we want to get to. We want to get to how we can take your successes and even your setbacks to help all of our peers. And so as you come back, we are really, really, this is, I'm sorry, I'm going to give up the White House a secret. As you're invited to this and we look at the amount of sessions we're going to have, it's still only going to scratch the surface of the 18,000. So the investment for us, the candy was coming to the White House. The investment for us is that the expectation would be that you're now a surrogate for change, that you will not because you learned something new, is that you're starting to recognize that you yourselves are already change agents, you're already making a difference, and that you will now uplift your successes, some recommendations we have and lessons we have learned to tell the rest of the field. And if you do that, then if we reach 500 people, then in the 6 months, that could be 5,000. And before you know it, we're talking about 18,000 agencies, 800,000 cops, understanding where we're trying to go together. So, you know, that was part of the expectation to bring you to the White House. So make sure he earns all the work that you're going to do ahead of time.
One last question, because I know you have to duck out.
Yes.
On this side.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Mike DeLeo from Tallahassee Police Department. My question really is where do we go from here? We talk about in the report references mass incarceration, policies and things that are outside our control. Where do we go from here with the rest of the system?
Right.
We're the most visible component. It falls upon us in the day-to-day activities. We recognize that most of the things in the report, most of our agencies are already doing with community engagement. Where do we go with here with the legislative processes that created these laws? Where do we go with fast food drive-through justice with plea bargaining? Where do we address the corrections process?
Right.
This is just scratching the surface as far as our component. What is the task force, when is the president's plan to follow up, looking at the entire system?
Right. So it's a great question. In fact, if you look at the task force report, I know you have, I think it's the first recommendation they make is talking about a larger focus on the criminal justice system. You hear the president talk about it. I know through my sister component, Carol Mason, the Assistant Attorney General Office of Justice Program, has a lot of grants and projects dealing with things on smart prosecutors, smart on crime, justice reinvestment, the idea that we look at our correctional system so that we can reduce recidivism, and you're seeing some states do that. So you're right, this is scratching the surface, the most visible. I would say this, and I don't think the task force was designed to address those issues or relieve them of their accountability. If anything, if I'm going to be very candid, I think what ends up happening is everyone knows that this is part of a larger system. For the first time since I've been a cop, I see people now questioning prosecutors about whether to convene a grand jury or not, about independent prosecutions and special prosecutors. So I think a lot of people are starting to realize that it's not just the police. But right now, this is the part I would say I would get back to the task force, is that we have 59 recommendations, about 38 are for local law enforcement. There's some others that are designed for the federal system, that we were able to come together, build consensus, and if we can get agencies around the country, right now we have hundreds if not thousands that are trying to implement it, then the lesson to the other systems is to follow law enforcement. We've been leaders for years in many, many ways. This is another. That when you have the courage to do the self-reflection, if you will, and even before the task force, we have always done that. We have always been the first to criticize ourselves, the first to make changes. But I think we have to focus on, at least before we point, I think first let's do some initial steps in implementing these changes and focusing on that so we can show the value of it while we're still demanding and asking and requesting and everything, that it goes broader. And I think you will see that there's a lot of focus on the broader system to be had. Like I said, but the report, it is confined primarily to policing, and that was by design, it was by intent. But I still think we focus on that. Not to give you an answer to the side of that, it's just important that if we now, before we even really get situated, before we get kind of institutionalizing these changes, start going off track, I think we can get distracted. I think we can do both, that we basically really focus as law enforcement on these recommendations or making these changes. And I think the next steps are a couple things. One, how many police chiefs? I think it's hard to find a chief that doesn't know it, but make sure the field is aware of the report. Two, that people have read it and that they're going to do an evaluation of their department relative to the recommendations and other best practices. Three, that they take a look at implementation guides that we have to start looking at implementing those recommendations they don't have. We have a project with the International Association of Chiefs of Police where we're going to be working with 15 agencies that have already started significant implementation. And number 15 is small. We wanted it small because we wanted to learn the lessons as they implement it, that the ICP will be putting out guides that says, here's how you implement this recommendation and that recommendation, that we basically get those recommendations out, that we start implementing it. And I think the more we implement it, the more we will be identifying how the other parts of the system actually do need to change. So I don't have a good answer for you, but other than we recognize that, there's some efforts at it, but I think right now the focus is on the front end of the system.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Ron.
So thank you guys very much. Have a good day.
Ron is running to a meeting to follow up on a lot of the items that came up in the 4.5-hour-long meeting with the president, which is, as you know, very unusual for the president to sit down that long, and Ron is going to help lead the charge. So that's why I had to pull him. But thank you.
They mentioned a 4-hour meeting. So you met with 2 hours. The president met with law enforcement for 2 hours.
Yeah, on Monday. Yeah, that's a good point.
The president's schedule, 2 hours is a lot. Think about you as chief of command. A 2-hour meeting is a pretty significant meeting. Imagine a 4-hour meeting for the president of the United States. Just turn on the news and all the other challenges. And I'm gonna tell you something. I had the privilege of sitting in that meeting, and I'm not just here just to make it look good. But when I say 4 hours, I'm 52 years old, and my bladder I was twisted and turned back. 4 hours is a long time. And we're sitting there, he never moved once. He took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, literally facilitated, like a professional facilitator, taking people's names, calling on people, tying stuff. I'm talking full engagement. And if you could see what we see when working with the president, his respect and understanding of the system, you would understand why we're pushing so hard, because I think he's 100% right. This is something that can be done, and it's going to take some time, but it takes a lot of commitment. So just know that this, like I said, with 30 years, I wouldn't say this if I didn't mean it, that this president is truly committed in understanding where police and the criminal justice system needs to be. And to watch it for 4 hours was amazing. And to watch that, like I said, and not having to go to the bathroom was even more amazing.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate it. Another round of applause for Ron. So shortly, we're actually going to be transitioning to another room, but to end this part of the day, and by the way, your question was a great one, and I think you obviously came ready to work and try to dig in on these issues. Would love to hear that question again at the end of today's session, so that we could, I think, look at it from another perspective based on the recommendations that we're going to dig in on today. But I want to bring up one of our partners, and what we try to do is we try to integrate folks, law enforcement officials, in part of the day. You're going to see another law enforcement official in one of our sessions later. But Bloomington, Indiana Chief Dykoff has been a partner of ours on a number of issues, most recently on the Police Data Initiative. And just wanted to ask him to come up, and he's going to share for a few minutes because we're going to have to move to our next room, but he's going to share his perspective, especially in the light of recent events and some of the work he's been doing with the administration. And again, Chief Dykoff, thank you for joining us.
So I was basically asked to kind of talk about what we have done. I got a new boss in January, a new mayor, and he had asked that I look at the 21st Century Policing Report and implement it in our city. And I had read it before and gone through it, and thought there's a lot of things in there that we're doing. But he wanted a more formal process, and he asked that I do that. I include our Civilian Oversight Board and the community. So I started looking at it, and what we decided to do with the report was we broke it down by the pillars, and we took a month and went through the pillar and presented a report to our Board of Safety, which is our Civilian Review Board, and asked for their feedback. So we're doing that with each pillar. I started bringing in officers because obviously they're a key component to all this, and tried to get a cross-section of the officers to come in, explain it, get their feedback. So we're doing all of this. At the end of the year, we'll have a report that we will then present to the community, and we'll start bringing the community in. It's going to take us some time. I think that's good. We're getting a lot of input, and in the end, I think that it will give the community a better understanding of what we are doing. It will give my officers a better understanding of best practices, and I think hopefully the whole thing will be a win-win for everybody. On the Police Data Initiative, that was another project that my mayor asked that we look at and participate in. So I a couple months ago, participated in a conference call about the initiative, and thought, okay, it's data, we can release that. Started looking at what other departments and agencies had done, and my boss picked 10 data sets for us to release. Most agencies are doing 3 and 4, but he asked that we do 10, so we did that. And as I actually look at other departments and look at what we're doing, there are several more that we're going to start to release also. And that was more controversial in my agency than the 21st Century Policing Report, because my officers are now like, wait a minute, this is stuff on us. How's this going to impact us? This is going to be used for complaints and to get us in trouble. So again, I brought in a group of officers and started going through it and explaining it. It's the communication. You all have employees that are, I'm sure, question your motives of every day of what you do. I have that. We're an agency of 100 officers, so we're not large, but we still have people that question that. And so sitting down with them and going through it and explaining it, that this is not going to be used to get you in trouble. It's used to put out information as to what we do. And what I'm finding is, by releasing that data, it really tells the story of what our agency does every day. And so that's a good thing. The community, most communities don't have any idea what police agencies do day in and day out. So this is an excellent opportunity for us to release all this data and tell our story. So I won't take up any more time. It's initially, when I got involved on this, I was skeptical, but I've seen a lot of positives that I think will be good for the profession as we move forward. The dialogue that it's gonna create is important. I think we need to have that. It's I think changing the mindset of my officers because they see what we're doing. They see the need to be able to communicate this information and this message. So thank you.